30 seconds and counting.
There were plenty of years where there were guys who would dread being drafted by the Buffalo Bills. Not anymore.
Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds.
Brandon Beane realizes they're in a window of 2 to 3 years max to get this done while the iron's still hot. And getting Von Miller into that situation was big for the Bills.
10, 9.
Oh, baby.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Great interview, guys.
What is up, Buffalo Fanatics? Z-Bot here with you, live on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel on a Wednesday night. And that, of course, can only mean one thing. It is the Smoke Break, powered by BetUS. Plenty to talk about tonight here on the Smoke Break. We'll talk, of course, about the Combine kicking off tomorrow in Indianapolis. Take a look at what Brandon Beane had to say at his press conference, as well as Sean McDermott. Take a peek at James Cook's Instagram, a cryptic post letting us know that time is a-ticking. Is it going to be in his favor or not? We'll also talk about report cards. The NFLPA report cards have been released for this past season. Is it a report card the Bills are going to want to put on the fridge and hang proudly? Or is it one that they're going to want to bury in their book bag and make sure that the parents never see it? But we start tonight, of course, with the extension of Khalil Shakir. Before we dive into it, we wanted to let you know, of course, that promo code YouTube150 on BetUS is still rocking and rolling. Make sure to take advantage of it. The promo code is YouTube150. It gets you a 150% sign-up bonus up to $2,000 on your first deposit and 125% bonus on your next two after that. So Brandon Beane is off and running this offseason, and it starts with the extension of the Bills' leading receiver a season ago. Khalil Shakir signs his extension yesterday. 4 years, $60 million. Feels real good to have Khalil locked up for the next 4 years, especially after the progression we've seen from him. He really started to show promise in the later stages of the 2023 season when it felt like the role was diminishing in terms of his role on the offense. Both those guys depart, and we saw Khalil Shakir rise to the occasion this past season, led the team in targets, led the team in yards as well. And he was really the guy going into the season that we all relied upon as Bills fans to be the guy that was going to be able to find a way to fill the large shoes left behind by Diggs and Davis. And last year we saw Khalil answer that call, 821 yards to lead the team, 76 catches on that team, leading 100 targets. And he really has been Josh Allen's most reliable target. He has been Josh Allen's safety blanket. And we've known him to be the guy that essentially catches everything that comes his way. That's pretty much what Brandon Beane had said in his press conference addressing the extension. Brandon Beane called him Mr. Dependable. And I think that's exactly how we all view Khalil Shakir. When Josh Allen targets Khalil Shakir, it's more often than not, he's coming down with the ball. So I think Mr. Dependable is a hell of a way to coin what we all kind of think of when we think about Khalil Shakir and his role, his impact on the Buffalo Bills offense. But when you think about the idea of locking him in for 4 years, he just turned 25 on February 3rd of this. So the 3rd of this month, just turned 25. It always kills me, by the way. My sister was born in 2000. Seeing 2000, the year 2000, and then seeing how that results in 25 years ago, it will never not blow my mind. I don't know about you guys, but the year 2000 to me, it feels like, I don't know, 10 years ago, 25 years ago. So Khalil Shakir, born in February of 2000. Guy's only 25 years old. By the time this extension is done, he still won't be 30. And you're getting a guy that is coming off a year where not only did he lead the Bills in receiving, but he was considered to be a top 30 wide receiver overall by PFF. And he's not necessarily the receiver you look at in terms of stacking him up against the rest of the league. He has a very specific role that he executes very well. And when it comes down to that slot receiver role that he plays, he really is one of the best in the league. And it feels like a lot of people outside of Buffalo do not understand how good Khalil Shakir is or the impact he has on this offense. I'm scrolling through the Twitter comments on the tweet that the Bills put out, the extension announcement for Khalil Shakir, excuse me. I'm scrolling through the comments, and anybody who had any affiliation with Buffalo was stoked about it. Everybody seemed to love it. Felt like the Bills got a really good deal. We're happy for Khalil Shakir, and we're just happy in general to be of the mindset that this guy is locked in for these Bills for at least the next 4 years. The comments that were being made outside of the Buffalo fan base, so to speak, everybody was saying, wow, holy overpay. Wow, overpay city. Really? Khalil Shakir making this much money? And I think that our perception on the amount of money anymore is so skewed because of how much these numbers go up every year. I mean, we just saw a $20 million increase on the cap this season alone. Last year, it was an unprecedented increase. It went down during COVID. The NFL had signed a new broadcasting deal. The salary cap went through the roof last year. And then we're going to see another $20 million increase this year. It just goes up and up and up and up. And I think people see these numbers now and they see $60 million to a guy that isn't necessarily a household name unless you're a Bills fan. And they're thinking to themselves, well, I don't really know this guy. He isn't on my Sports Center top 10 reel when I'm watching at night, right? He isn't all over my Twitter feed, my Instagram feed, making highlight reel plays. How is he making $60 million? Because $60 million does sound like a lot of money. I mean, of course, it is a lot of money. But when it comes down to the wide receiver position, it really isn't all that crazy. The contract Khalil signs, $60 million, $15 million a year average. That puts him now at the 23rd highest paid wide receiver. And you're looking at the numbers guys are making right now. And obviously, I'm not sitting here making a comparison between Justin Jefferson and Khalil Shakir. That's apples to oranges. But Justin Jefferson, obviously leading the way right now in terms of most money paid per year. His money is going to start to seem cheap for Minnesota in a couple of years here. Jamar Chase wants 40 minimum. He wanted 40 last year. And the Bengals didn't pay him. Then he goes out and wins the Triple Crown. Number just went up. T. Higgins, he wants his money. And we saw the GM for the Cincinnati Bengals talk about his desire to keep T. Higgins in the building at his press conference during the week here at the Combine. And T. Higgins tweeted out a cap symbol, the little hat. And for those who aren't hip to all the internet tween lingo these days, the little cap, the little hat emoji means you're lying. You're full of it. Now, we don't have the full context as to what he was referring to, but one can only imagine that the day that the Cincy GM talks about how they're working through trying to get a deal done, he's confident in it, this and that, T. Higgins tweets out the little cap symbol. One can only imagine that means, I don't know about all that. I don't know if that's actually happening the way that you're saying that it is. So you're going to see this money continue to go up and up and up. Justin Jefferson's one of the best wide receivers we've seen in a long time. And I think Jamar Chase might even be better. So comparing that, I understand it's not really a fair comparison at all. It's not a fair comparison at all. But when you look at the amount of money per year that the guys around where Khalil Shakir is now, he fits right in my opinion. So Khalil Shakir now just over $15 million a year. Like I said, makes him the 23rd highest paid wide receiver. And you're looking at the guys surrounding him. Give you a perfect example. Gabe Davis is tied for the 25th highest paid wide receiver in Jacksonville. 25th highest paid wide receiver. So you had Gabe Davis, who the Bills had in the building. They moved off of. He goes to Jacksonville. And I think even at the time, we were kind of saying, man, don't you remember? I think I went live the second he signed with Jacksonville because during the free agency period last year, it was one of the first signings of the period. right when free agency kicked off, Gabe Davis was a Jag. And I think a lot of people at the time were like, man, that feels like an overpay. And as we can, base it on right now, who would you rather have right now? 25th highest paid receiver, Gabe Davis, or 23rd highest paid wide receiver in Khalil Shakir? I think the answer is obvious. You're looking around there. You got Tyler Lockett, who I can't believe is still playing in this league. It feels like Tyler Lockett has been a receiver in this league for 2 decades. God bless him. He's continuing to roll the way he is. Doesn't it not feel like Tyler Lockett has been playing football forever? I feel like I've had Tyler Lockett on my fantasy team since I was in middle school. You got Cortland Sutton in that realm, Christian Kirk, Darnell Mooney, Alan Lazard, Jacoby Myers. So you're looking at the money being paid based on the guys around that similar type of money. And I think that's when you start to realize that what the Bills got out of this deal was very beneficial to the organization. Spot Track, prior to the signing, Spot Track had the fair market value for Khalil Shakir at 4 years, $77 million. That was what the fair market value was considered to be for Khalil Shakir. 4 years, $77 million. He ended up signing for 4 years, $60 million. So I know the number seems big, right? $60 million. Anymore, for what the Bills got here, you get a guy that's your leading receiver last year, by far Josh Allen's most reliable, dependable target that he clearly trusts the most. A guy that has only shown growth each year. Plus a guy that I think when you stack him up against any other slot receiver in the league, he stacks up with the best of them. We're talking about a guy that I think flies massively under the radar because, like I said earlier, he is just not this massive household name who's, making one-hand grabs down the sidelines and racking up 200-yard games. But we saw what this Bills offense was last year without a lack of any of that anywhere. And Khalil Shakir was a massive piece to that. For a passing offense that was not necessarily based on the receiving numbers, the most insane in the league, they executed as efficiently as anybody else in the NFL. And I think if you don't have Khalil Shakir on that team last year, how much different does it look? Because based on what we saw throughout the league, and then we compare it to what Buffalo did last year, it's obvious that the Bills do not have nearly the talent at the wide receiver position than some of these other top-tier teams do. And a guy like Khalil Shakir might not be somebody that everybody's privy to at this point outside of Buffalo. But you remove him from that offense, and it's going to look a hell of a lot different. But beyond just what he means to the Bills, in terms of the NFL itself, I mean, Khalil Shakir at the slot position, not just for the Bills, but in the NFL in general, he has truly been one of the more reliable targets in the NFL. According to the 33rd team, Khalil Shakir's catch rate among wide receivers and tight ends with 150-plus targets in the last 2 seasons ranks number 1 amongst all wide receivers and all tight ends, with a catch rate of over 80%. He's the only receiver / tight end in the entire league with a catch rate of over 80%. So reliable, clearly Josh Allen's favorite target, and you get him for a price that I think everybody would have signed up for. The only people I see that seem to find this to be a steal for Shakir as opposed to Buffalo are people that aren't Buffalo fans. And I think that all comes down to the idea that Khalil Shakir is not this massive household name. So when you see the money getting paid to Justin Jefferson, you see the money getting paid to CeeDee Lamb, and then you see that now Khalil Shakir is in that top 25 highest paid receivers, you might not be as aware of the impact that he has on a team like Buffalo. So you see the $60 million, and it might be eye-popping to you. But you're looking at guys now who are the top of the market. And once again, it's not like there was ever going to be a consideration where Khalil Shakir is going to be a top-of-the-market guy. But for what you're getting, Jamar Chase is about to make $40 million at the minimum. You're essentially getting Khalil Shakir's impact for a third of that. And right now, for what the Bills have and what he's been for Buffalo, that is damn good value, in my opinion, especially when you look at the guys that are in and around him. Because what Gabe Davis was bringing to the Bills, they didn't think it was worth that amount of money. I think Khalil Shakir has proven that he is worth that money. Plus, you're getting fresh off of turning 25 here. Fresh off of turning 25. You're getting one of the most reliable, sure-handed receivers in the league for the 23rd most amount of money at the position. So feels great to have him locked up for another 4 years. And we all are aware of the idea that he is, on most other teams, a wide receiver too. So even if you're looking at it from that standpoint, for the value you get for wide receiver two, think about if he was on another team where there was a bona fide wide receiver one. $15 million a year for a top tier wide receiver two is still pretty damn good value. I mean, think about it. Tyler Lockett is wide receiver number 2 on his team. Alan Lazard is wide receiver number 2 on his team. Christian Kirk, wide receiver number 2. Chris Godwin, wide receiver number 2. He's making $20 million. So you're looking at these guys who aren't even wide receiver 1 on their own team. Right now, Khalil Shakir is wide receiver 1. Is he wide receiver 1 on, 32 teams? Is he wide receiver 1 on 16 of them? Probably not. But what he is for Buffalo currently, what he's been for Josh Allen, and what he's shown throughout his young career here, the promise that he's shown, the money based on the value you're getting back, you're signing up for that any day of the week. And I think Brandon Beane was definitely satisfied with the deal made there, and Khalil Shakir has to be too. But when you're considering what the fair market value was considered for him, hard to not be excited about what the Bills were able to pull off here with Khalil Shakir, certainly saving more money than I think would have been anticipated by some of these other teams. I mean, we've seen teams just throw money at wide receivers seemingly at will, just hoping something sticks. I saw somebody tweet out a comparison. Just to give you an example, Jalen Waddle is the 7th highest paid wide receiver in the league. 7th highest paid. Jalen Waddle is making $28 million a year. So that's roughly double. That's roughly double what Khalil Shakir is set to make. And I know it's a one-season sample size, but think about it like this. Last year, Jalen Waddle had 83 targets for 744 yards and 2 touchdowns. And that's damn near $30 million invested into the wide receiver position for him. James Cook last year, more targets, more yards, more touchdowns all across the board. But Jalen Waddle, household name. Everybody knows Jalen Waddle. Everybody's drafting Jalen Waddle on their fantasy team. Everybody knows that Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, that's the duo, right? It's not a diss at Jalen Waddle. I mean, he's still a great receiver. But when you factor in the money being spent, would you rather have Jalen Waddle than Khalil Shakir? I think many people would say yes. But would you rather have Jalen Waddle at $28 million, or would you rather have Khalil Shakir at $15 million? And this is what matters here, right? Obviously, if you had an infinite amount of money to spend, you'd spend it towards the top of the league. When you're factoring in what you're getting for the dollar amount, $28 million for Jalen Waddle, $15 million for Khalil Shakir, who had a better season across the board last year. Sign me up. Maddie the Video starting us off this evening, coming in saying, Zeba, I'm happy we locked in Shakir. Also, I am dealing either with a nasty food virus or a very bad fever, but I'm glad you're live and that I can enjoy your stream and hopefully cook and stay in Buffalo. Maddie, thanks so much for tuning in. So sorry to hear you're feeling like crap. I feel like I've had at least one stint like what you're going through right now the last couple of months. I was going through that at least once a month from like November to January. So hopefully I can get out of February alive here. We only have a couple of days left, but I'm hoping that you're feeling better soon. Appreciate you tuning in. And hopefully it's the food virus and not something else, because the food virus, I've had those before, believe me. But those tend to go away quick. They suck. They seem to be the most intense between a normal sickness and like a food sickness thing. The food one always seems to be more intense, but it seems to go away quicker. Walt's coming in. Walt's saying, I feel like you're making an argument, Zeba, on why he's overpaid. If he's really overlooked, like you're saying, he shouldn't be making $15 million per year. I mean, I don't think I'm making an argument that he's overpaid. I think I'm making an argument that he's perfectly paid. I think he's overlooked by the rest of the league is what I'm kind of getting at. You know, you bring up Khalil Shakir to your buddy who watches, he watches Monday Night Football and Sunday Night Football, but he's not tuned into the Sunday afternoon games. He's casual, He doesn't really know. Like, I'm talking about the type of fan that they don't know their team's record. We all know those type of fans, right? They don't know what's going on. They'll tune in every now and then. That type of fan does not know who Khalil Shakir is. Unless you are a Bills fan, the fan that plays fantasy football and watches primetime games doesn't know their team's record whatever. They don't know who Khalil Shakir is, right? So you're saying that's what I mean, Z-Bot. If he's overlooked by the league, then you should get a deal. Well, I think the Bills did get a deal. I don't think he's overlooked by Buffalo. That's for sure. And there's plenty of guys who are at the top of their game that are overlooked by the league. And we've been saying that about Matt Milano for the longest time, right? In fact, you could say that about multiple guys on the Bills defense. And I think that's why we got so upset when there were so many all-pro snubs, or at least consideration for being on the all-pro, right? Guys like Christian Benford who come to mind. There's guys like that all throughout the league that just aren't household names, no matter how good of a player that they are. I mean, I see what you're saying. But I think if we're looking at in terms of what the value being brought to the table is and what the Bills ended up paying him for that value, I think it's a match made in heaven. Because even if, quote unquote, he is overlooked, right, or he is underrated, the way that things are set up now, we talk about this all the time, and it's a little bit different with the wide receiver position because it feels like it is very tiered out. Everybody's well aware of who the best wide receivers in the league are. And I think when you're comparing a true wide receiver one to a slot type receiver like Khalil Shakir, no one's ever, the agent or him or the organization is never anticipating a conversation where top of the market money is being put on the table. That's kind of what the James Cook situation, in my opinion, sort of looks like right now. The James Cook situation, yes, last year did he lead in touchdowns? Yes, last year did he have 1,000 yards? Absolutely. But is he treated as a true bona fide every down back like Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and the rest of the highest paid players in the league are at that position? And the answer is no. Just like Khalil Shakir, is he treated as a true wide receiver one if you were to put him on the same pedestal as Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb? The answer is no. But he's the wide receiver one for Buffalo. And James Cook's one of the best running backs in the league. Khalil Shakir is one of the best slot receivers in the league. But I think it comes down to nuances when you're talking about the amount of money being spent and you're talking about the value you're getting in return for that amount of money. So I think it's a absolute killer deal. Brandon Beane starting the offseason off hot. Good for Khalil Shakir. You know, you're talking about a wide receiver who gets drafted out of Boise State in the 5th round, and this is what dreams are made of, man. You get drafted in the 5th round, late in the 5th round, out of Boise State, sort of one of those programs. Obviously, they were in the college football playoff last year, but it's not in the realm of Ohio State and Penn State, Notre Dame. So you come out of one of the smaller Power 5 schools, so to speak, even though anymore, I guess you really can't say that about Boise State, you know, in the playoffs this past year. But you come out in the 5th round, and a couple of years later, you're earning yourself a $60 million contract. Those are what dreams are made of. Real humble dude. Everybody loves him. Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, they couldn't have had higher praise for him, and rightfully so. I mean, he's a guy, if we're talking about wide receiver position, you guys know how it is nowadays, right? Wide receivers, that's your biggest concern when it comes to, you know, potential character issues, potential diva status, right? Khalil Shakir is a bruiser. He's a grinder. Head down. If I get the ball, great. If not, I'm going to be making an impact elsewhere. And he's been making an impact all over the field for Buffalo the last couple of seasons, no more so than last year. The guy truly is one of the toughest tackles in the league. Getting him down on first contact is nearly impossible. He's one of the best in the league, not only at catching the ball, but once he does catch the ball, it really doesn't get a whole lot better at the position in terms of yards after the catch. And ever since Cole Beasley left the Bills, they had a real tough time finding a replacement for yards after the catch. It was one of the biggest criticisms that we had of the Bills offense. It just felt like there was never any consistent yard after the catch being developed or being produced by any receiver after Cole Beasley left the building. And here you got Khalil Shakir now, who's arguably one of, if not the best yard after catch receiver in the league. So not only are you getting one of the most surefire, dependable targets in terms of when you're throwing him the ball, he's going to grab it. But once he does grab it, you are also getting a wide receiver that is one of the best in the league, bringing that ball upfield. So we all love Khalil Shakir. Clearly the organization does as well, and real excited about the future for Khalil Shakir in Buffalo, locked up for another 4 years. And Looking forward to building around him. It'd be nice to get to the point where Khalil Shakir does find his way to cement himself into that wide receiver 2 role as opposed to the wide receiver 1 role. I think that's where he could potentially flourish the most. Khalil Shakir has been great as the primary target. I think, imagine how great he could be if he wasn't. If the Bills are able to develop Keon Coleman into being the guy they drafted him to be, if they're able to get a guy in free agency here or the offseason in general, the draft, if they're able to get a guy that emerges as that bona fide wide receiver 1, I think that Khalil Shakir only gets better. And the Bills are going to continue, of course, to build around Josh Allen on this offense while they still can. I think it's inevitable that this offseason that wide receiver depth is going to be added to this team. Not only is, do we want it to happen? It has to happen. If you watch the 2 press conferences for Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott this past week at the Combine, the question about adding speed and downhill threat at the wide receiver position was brought up to both guys because it's obvious. In fact, I thought it was hilarious. If you go and watch the Brandon Beane presser, Sal Capaccio asked Brandon Beane, he goes, "Do you need to add speed or a home run hitter to your wide receiver core?" And Brandon Beane responds by saying, "I know you asked me that because that's your way of telling me I need to get speed, Sal." So Sal goes, "Do you need to add speed or a home run hitter to your wide receiver core?" And Beane goes, "I know you're asking me that because that's your way of telling me that I do need to add it." So it's no secret. Everybody knows that. The Bills are obviously going to do it. It's depending on, is it going to be in free agency? And if it is, how much money are they going to be willing to spend? We talked about this the other day with Amari Cooper. How much more are they willing to give him in terms of years here or any at all, really? Are they going to be willing to pay him around what Khalil Shakir just got paid to keep him around? Are they going to test free agency elsewhere? A guy like Chris Godwin, perhaps, somebody like that. Are they going to look into that, or is it going to be draft? But I think no matter what, I think the obvious answer to the question of whether or not the Bills are going to be adding at that position is a resounding yes. So we talked about James Cook just a second ago, and I think that that's a fair comparison, right? Khalil Shakir, I think, is paid perfectly for exactly what he is. He would be the star wide receiver 2 on, I think, just about any team in the league. But when it comes to wide receiver 1, would he be the primary guy on the majority of teams in the NFL? And I think the answer is no. And that's not an indictment on Khalil Shakir, more so than it is a credit to some of these other teams who have just stout wide receiver cores. But it's also more of an indictment on what the Bills have added to that room or what the Bills currently have in that room. There's a reason why the questions are being asked. Hey, where's the priority, or where is it on the priority list right now in terms of adding speed and a home run hitting type threat at wide receiver in this offseason? It's because it's obvious to everyone right now that the Bills do not have it. That's why, to me, it's just so impressive that this past year, Josh Allen has yet another 40 touchdown season. They score 30 points a game. They have, by most metrics, an historic offensive year based on their franchise standard. And we're still sitting around here saying, yeah, this is not nearly good enough at the wide receiver position. Still didn't have a 1,000-yard receiver. Still didn't have a guy that really emerged as one of those, other than Khalil Shakir in the middle being a sure-handed guy. We don't have that go up and get it guy yet. That's what Keon Coleman is supposed to be. Hopefully he becomes it. But the Bills do not really have a resounding threat in the wide receiver room currently, like many other teams do. And when you look at Khalil Shakir, what he brings to the Bills is perfect. And I think he would bring that same thing to other teams, but he wouldn't necessarily be the focal point like he is in Buffalo. And that's kind of what the point is here on James Cook in terms of comparing him to other running backs in the league and the way they're utilized on their teams compared to the way James Cook is currently utilized in Buffalo. No debating that James Cook, as it stands right now, is one of the best running backs in the league. But he's not utilized the way that you would think one of the top running backs in the league would be. And that's what's interesting about this whole situation, is that when you're looking at the guys that are making top of the market money at the position, those are guys who are 3-down backs, who are bruisers, guys that are getting the ball just about every snap. You can rely on them not only on first down, of course, but on 3rd and short as well, in the pass game, and really the offense is as predicated around them as it is the quarterback. And that goes without saying for all of the top guys currently in the league right now. And James Cook, of course, wants $15 million a year. That's the number that he's throwing out. That's the number that everybody has universally agreed upon is the number that he is looking to acquire in his next contract here. And he once again let it be known again on Instagram just the other day. I'll pull it up for you if you haven't seen it yet. So this was yesterday. James Cook on his Instagram posts a picture of him against the Chiefs with an emoji of the hourglass moving downward as if to say clock's ticking. And then the little purple devil smiling emoji. Here it is. So this is what James Cook posted on his Instagram story yesterday. So there's him playing, and we got the hourglass ticking and the smirky, devilish purple emoji. Now, this is what the league has turned into. This is the new thing. I mean, I don't know when this exactly started. I'd love to go back and find out who the pioneer of all this was. But during this period of your career where you're looking to get paid and you want to make it known that you're looking to get paid, this is the way it's done now. You remove any affiliation with the team you're currently on from your social media, whether that be deleting photos or changing your profile picture or removing the team from your bio, whatever. And then you kind of post cryptic posts. I mean, that's just what it is. And I don't really know when this started, but it is obviously the phenomenon that has been spread across the league. Everybody does this now. So in the press conference just yesterday, live from Indianapolis for the Combine, Brandon Beane was asked about it. And Brandon Beane started off by saying how much he loves James Cook. Beautiful man is what he called him. And he said he wants James here, and he knows the business is the business. He did say, however, he would prefer if we didn't take the business outside. Now, this has been the one thing I've mentioned this before. I'm all about players wanting to get paid and getting paid, especially at positions where your lifeline in this league is shorter than others. You're going to be able to play quarterback and wide receiver far longer than you're going to be able to play the running back position. Oftentimes, by the time a stout running back gets to the point where he's up for his second contract, most teams find more value in going younger and cheaper than repaying the guy that's been great for them for the last 5-6 years. That's just what the league has been. Unless you are a Hall of Fame talent like CMC, Barkley, Henry, and there's, very, very few of those in the league. Unless you are of that caliber, most teams now have taken the approach of, we are going to pay you your rookie contract. If you've been stellar throughout it, we could hit you with the franchise tag. And then by that point, we're nearly 6 years in. And if we want to keep you around, we're going to have to pay you top of the market money. And the question comes into play. Okay, yeah, James Cook's been phenomenal, right? 1,000-yard year, 16 plus touchdowns. Phenomenal. But as time goes on here, Beane, much like other GMs throughout the league, look at it and say, he's been great. Well, as we were just talking about, like the comparison between Jalen Waddle and Khalil Shakir, Jalen Waddle's been real solid for the Miami Dolphins. But when you're looking at $28 million compared to what the Bills are getting out of Khalil Shakir for $15 million, the Bills might look at it and say, man, James Cook's been incredible. But we don't consider him to be Barkley, Henry, CMC, Josh Jacobs. And it's not necessarily because he doesn't have the ability to be that. If James Cook were on other teams, he very well could be that. If James Cook were on a team that did not have Josh Allen, and they were running it at a 75-25 clip or something like that, 70-30 clip, where you just have no trust in your offense. It's not necessarily predicated about your quarterback or around your quarterback because frankly, he's not talented enough for it to be that. I mean, the Indianapolis Colts is a perfect example with Jonathan Taylor. The Colts have no trust in Anthony Richardson, and that's because he has one of the worst completion percentage we've ever seen through a quarterback start here, and that's when he's on the field, which has been seldom since he's been drafted here. So the Indianapolis Colts have to pay a guy like Jonathan Taylor top of the market money, not only because he's worthy of it based on how he's played, but because he is their offense. That is what their offense goes through. As it stands right now, the Indianapolis Colts offense does not go through Anthony Richardson because it can't. And then when he's not on the field, you got guys like Joe Flacco out there. And I got a lot of respect and love for Joe Flacco, but in 2025, you don't want your offense going through Joe Flacco if you can help it. So you got a guy like Jonathan Taylor, and that is where your offense is going to be centered around. So if James Cook was in Indianapolis and you just remove Jonathan Taylor and throw James Cook in there, maybe the Colts are considering $15 million a year. But I'll tell you this right now, James Cook would not be in the middle of the pack in terms of attempts if he was on the Indianapolis Colts. Right? It would be a whole different style of play. He would obviously be as good as he currently is talent-wise. He might not have the same production because I don't know if the offensive line talent is nearly as good as what the Bills currently possess. And I also think it opens things up for you when you do have a guy like Josh Allen taking the primary pressure of the defense. The primary game plan every single week is how the hell do we stop 17, right? But 207 attempts for James Cook last year. And if you're in a situation, I keep using the situation for Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor had nearly 100 more attempts than James Cook a season ago. Nearly 100 more attempts on the ground. Saquon Barkley had nearly 150 more attempts. So Brandon Beane was asked about this, and I found it interesting because I think this is how a lot of these guys have to feel. If you're Brandon Beane and you're seeing the Instagram posts and the tweets and whatnot about the amount of money you want and kind of putting pressure on, at the very minimum, it doesn't make your job any easier. And I don't think you're not even getting asked these questions about James Cook and his contract. You're not even going to be questioned about that situation unless you're in the current spot that they're in right now. And that is him putting his foot on the gas towards a contract. And I love nothing more than these guys getting paid because, like I just mentioned, these running backs have a very short time span to do it. Because unlike any other position, they seem to be the most recycled in the NFL. It's just been the way it's gone outside of that Hall of Fame tier type list of guys at the top. So you understand why he wants to get paid. What I've found interesting is that this is an odd time for him to start doing it, I think. If this was happening this year, then or next year, this time next year, I should say. If this was happening this time next year, I think it would make more sense after the fourth year. Because the Bills do not have any incentive to sign him as it stands right now. And Christian McCaffrey already has the league-leading average money per year at 19. And nobody's passing that anytime soon, other than maybe Saquon if they do another deal, which I doubt happens anytime soon because he just signed with Philadelphia last year. Nobody's surpassing $19 million at the running back position. So for those who say, well, it's $15 million now, price is only going to go up next year, I sincerely doubt it. I sincerely doubt it. I've had a lot of people say, well, they got to get it done. The reason Cook's doing this right now, prior to his fourth year, and the reason why the Bills should entertain it is because the price is only going to go up. So if you're looking at the amount of money being spent right now, I misspoke, by the way. I got my 9 and my 6 mixed up. So Christian McCaffrey at $16 million. Kamara's already at $15 million. Jonathan Taylor's at 14. Saquon Barkley's at just under 13. Josh Jacobs is at 12. So you're looking at those set of guys, and unless one of those guys resets the market again, I don't know where the money's going up. We're already talking about 15 being up in the air. If the money were to go up, I think it would be inevitable that the Bills would just not be able to do it. Many people are already saying that the $15 million that he's asking for currently might be a bit high. If it goes up, then it's certainly going to be too high. But to those saying that if you don't do it now at 15, it's only going to go up, I don't think it is. I just don't see the running back position, which was considered an afterthought all the way until this past year, where it saw the resurgence based on the amount of guys that switched teams and had incredible years, right? Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry. We kind of rethought the way the running back position was considered based on what guys did this past season. But I wonder if that's more of an outlier than it is the trend, because the trend up until that point was exactly what I had just mentioned a minute ago, and that is get a hell of a lot of value out of a guy during his rookie year, franchise tag him if necessary, and by the time it's second contract time, does the value outweigh the finances going into a second contract? So when Brandon Beane is asked about this, I found this to be interesting because, as I just mentioned, the time getting paid being a priority for James Cook, I'm all about it. Totally understand where he's coming from, especially at that position. But it happening right now, this early in the offseason, going into his fourth year, as opposed to this time next year. If it was happening this time next year, I think it would make more sense to me. The Bills do not currently have any incentive to pay him going into this upcoming season unless they just want to either A, get it out of the way, or B, think that the amount of money paid to running backs is going to increase from this time right now to this time next year. And as I just got through saying, I personally don't see it happening. I personally do not see the threshold of pay at the running back position exceeding that $16 million mark where it currently stands. So the only incentive for the Bills would be to either A, try to beat the market, which I don't think is going anywhere substantial anytime soon, or just get it out of the way and have him locked in and not have to worry about it. But when you're talking about top of the market money, it's not a decision you can make just saying, oh, let's get it out of the way. Let's get it done now. Maybe this time next year, well, he's becoming a free agent. We got to get it done unless we want to franchise tag him. And that in itself is going to cost us more than maybe it would if we just decided to get a deal done now, because we were obviously going to consider making a deal. Makes more sense to do it now than to pay the franchise tag number. Because I think right now, let me see. I had it favored here. I had it pulled up. The current number, or the current franchise tag number for running backs. Let's take a peek. Saved it here somewhere. So the current franchise tag number for the running back position is $13.6 million. James Cook wants 15. So even if he wants 15, think about it like this. They got him under the rookie deal right now. No incentive to pay him going into the fourth year. The franchise tag number will increase a little bit this time next year, but it probably won't increase past 15 million. So the Bills could get 5 years out of James Cook under the rookie deal, and then but if the franchise tag is at and around 15, the Bills would then make, of course, the most sense to not go franchise tag if the idea in the building is we want to keep him here for the considerable future. So we might as well have that $15 million that would go towards the franchise tag go towards the contract in and of itself. But Brandon Beane was asked about James Cook, and he said the business is the business, and he mentioned that he would prefer that it wasn't taken outside the building, but he gets it. This isn't his first rodeo. He knows how it goes. But he said, just because we're not on the same page today, and this is a quote from Brandon Beane, just because we're not on the same page today doesn't mean we won't be tomorrow, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years from now. We'll see. So he insinuates that they're not currently on the same page. He says, just because we're not on the same page doesn't mean necessarily we won't be in the future. But the timetable there, it's quite vast. He goes from saying 2 days to 2 years. the way I read it, I don't think that there's considerable pressure on Brandon Beane to get a deal done here. And out of all the things it feels like he's got to tackle this offseason, improving the wide receiver room, improving the D-line, improving the secondary, I just can't help but think that on Brandon Beane's priority list, I can't imagine paying James Cook top of the market money going into his fourth year is anywhere near the top of that list. I understand everybody's want and desire to bring him back and to have him be a long-term piece for this team. I mean, I'd love nothing more, but it has to make sense on both sides, of course. And I think it makes the most sense to get that done when it's absolutely necessary. And out of all of the things it feels like the Bills have to accomplish this offseason, I don't know if getting a deal done that the player in question has no leverage on, that also would require paying top of the market money, you would essentially be, I can't say reset the market because it's already you already have Jonathan Taylor at $14 million and McCaffrey at $16 million, but McCaffrey's the only running back making above $15 million. So in a way, like, Christian McCaffrey was Offensive Player of the Year 2 seasons ago and just wasn't the same since he got hurt. But McCaffrey completely revolutionized the San Francisco 49ers. I highly doubt the Niners are in the Super Bowl 2 years ago if Christian McCaffrey is not on that team. He completely changed who they were, and they paid him accordingly. Also considered to be, from a business perspective, Christian McCaffrey too, it doesn't get better. He's one of the most famous players on the planet. Right? He's making 16. So outside of the outlier, you would essentially be resetting the market for all those guys underneath of Christian McCaffrey. And you'd be doing it at a time where I can't help but think that if I'm thinking of the priority list Brandon Beane currently has in front of him, getting this deal done right now can't be towards the top. If it was this time next year, I would say it could be 2 or 3, maybe 1, depending on what they got going on. Reading some comments here. So I see Walt saying there's no way they let him walk. Allen loves the dude. They definitely don't want to let him walk. I don't want to come across as being someone who thinks that I could live without him. I'm looking at it solely based on the idea of paying him at the highest possible point of the market. There's a difference between wanting a guy around and then not wanting to touch down on the top of the market for a team that already is, as it stands right now, above the cap. And then doing this in a spot as it stands currently at this moment in time where there's no pressure on the Bills to do this right now. I mean, think about it. Do you think that there's a running back right now that next year is going to sign a $20 million contract that's all of a sudden going to have James Cook asking for that amount? $15 million today feels like it's $15 million next year to me. I mean, you guys let me know off the top of your head if you feel like this time next year that the running back market financially is going to considerably increase. Because it feels like to me $15 million today, February 2024, is going to be $15 million, or 2024, February 2025. $15 million in February 2025 feels like it's going to be $15 million in February 2026. Now, maybe some off chance it bumps up to 16, whatever. There's just no way to me I see it being this massive difference. I mean, especially like when you look at other positions in the NFL too, and how the discrepancy in pay seems to change drastically. We go back to when Mahomes signed that record-breaking $500 million deal not all that long ago. It's already starting to look cheap. At the time, $500 million. We've never seen this before. Let me just take a peek here. because that's already starting to look cheap. What Josh Allen's making currently is cheap. And then guys like Dak Prescott come along and make $60 million, and that's when you really realize the value that some of these guys are playing on in terms of their current contract. Not necessarily like that at the running back position. The wide receiver position and the quarterback position seem to be the two, maybe the defensive end position as well, where it seems like the increase in annual salary average based on the next best guy reset in the market seems to be drastically different each year. So right now, if I just take a peek, Patrick Mahomes' average salary per year currently, $45 million. Jordan Love is making $55 million a year. Trevor Lawrence is making $55 million a year. Tua is making $53 million a year. So when did Mahomes sign his contract? Mahomes signed his 10-year, $503 million contract in 2020. 2020. So an average of $45 million a year. That was not even, it was 4 league years ago. 2020. $45 million a year, $500 million. Now, of course, that's stretched over 10 years, so that's why the number is so massive. But when you get down to what he's actually making per season, what he's actually taking off the cap, $45 million in average salary is Patrick Mahomes making currently. And that was only 5 years ago that he got that pay. Since then, ever since signing that contract in 2000, and by the way, Josh Allen's right there with him. He's $43 million a year on average. So him and Mahomes, the two best quarterbacks in the league, $45 million a year on average, $43 million a year on average. From the time that they signed their contracts to now, 5 years, the average salary per year for quarterbacks that are far less talented than they are is already up to $60 million. It's increased by $15 million over that time span, which is just insane when you really think about it, especially some of these guys that are making the money that they are. When you really like look at it with a magnifying glass, the idea of Dak Prescott making 60, Jordan Love 55, Lawrence 55, Tua 53, Kyler Murray 46. The fact that the Browns are paying Deshaun Watson $46 million fully guaranteed every year. So I don't imagine that the increase is going to be all that drastic. And I feel like the money asked for today is going to be the same amount this time next year. This is essentially a long-winded way of saying I 100% understand where James Cook is coming from. And I am 100% of the mindset that the Bills do not want James Cook going anywhere other than their own facility. But I feel like this is a year off. I just feel like it's 1 year off. I feel like it's a year off for James Cook asking for it. I feel like it's a year off from the Bills wanting to take care of it. If he genuinely wants to get a deal done, if the idea behind it, if James Cook's top priority, obviously the top priority is getting paid top dollar, but if slightly beneath the top priority being top dollar, if the other priority is getting a second contract with the team that was that you were drafted to, because the way it goes anymore for running backs, that is not a guarantee. Getting drafted and then getting a second contract by the team that drafted you is, I feel like it happens less often than not. So I feel like if you were to come to the table, despite not having any incentive on the Bills' end to get it done right now, if you were to come to the table not at 15, but at a lower number that the Bills couldn't deny, I feel like there's benefit for James Cook to do that. But it's just, he's not going to be able to get the top of the market value that he's currently asking for. So I guess it essentially comes down to the priority. Do you want the maximum amount of money possible, or do you want to shore yourself up for the long term with the team that drafted you and have that contract in place no matter what happens here? So it'll be interesting. But based on, I don't want to read too deep into it because we know with all these press conferences, I mean, Brandon Beane is a master at saying nothing while saying everything at the same time. I mean, he says a bunch of words, and after you calculate what he said, it really comes around to a whole lot of nothing. That's how these GMs operate. They're masters at answering questions without really giving you a bona fide answer. But from what we can discern from his answer based on James Cook being outspoken about the amount of money he currently wants and when he wants it, Brandon Beane simply said, just because we're not on the same page today doesn't mean we won't be tomorrow, 2 days from now, 2 weeks from now, 2 years from now. And I read that as I just don't think that when we're looking at Brandon Beane's priority list, paying James Cook top of the market money heading into a fourth year where he is already under contract is not at the top of it, especially considering all of the other moves that many of us feel need to be made in order for the Bills to finally get over that small hump that has optically been massive in the playoffs. By the way, I understand this sentiment completely, right? Richard's saying more touchdowns than any other running back, and that is the running back's job. Score TDs. I wish I could read this name. That calligraphy is, God, it's almost kind of making me go blind. While it's saying running back is so simple to figure out, it only took 5 years and 3 days, 2 picks to figure it out. Yeah, let Cook walk. This is no slight at Cook. It is an added benefit, though, that the run game started to considerably increase the second that the Bills' offensive line became a top unit in the league. There's a reason why the Bills went so long between Shady McCoy and James Cook not having a 1,000-yard rusher. The offensive line was not nearly what it's been. Now, you have to be good enough to take advantage of it. I'm not saying anybody could be plopped back behind the Bills' offensive line and rush for 1,000 yards. That's not at all what I'm saying. But when you are considering where the Bills are currently at, already over the cap as it stands, when you're considering going into a year where James Cook is already under contract and would be fined into oblivion if he sat out or held in, when you consider that he's asking for top of the market money going into that fourth year, and when you consider what the Bills have to get done outside of potentially addressing that situation going into this upcoming year, knowing that getting that deal done right now does not affect this upcoming year based on how the current contract is structured. This idea, this is what is kind of killing me about this whole idea. The idea of everybody being concerned about him walking, he's not going anywhere. He's under contract this upcoming season. He's not going anywhere. James Cook, as it stands, based on his current contract, there's no leverage on James Cook's part. So he's not going anywhere. I'm not overly concerned about the James Cook situation. I'm not. Because I just don't, I think it's being made out to be far more than it is right now. And this is why I would have to imagine this is kind of how Brandon Beane sees it. Yeah, the noise and the smoke around it currently is visible. It's loud. But when it gets down to it, when you get down to what actually has to be done at this current moment, well, nothing has to get done. And as Koala's saying here, like Cook going to sit out, waste of a paycheck. I don't know if he's going to do that. He's already mentioned he doesn't want to be a distraction, and I believe him. But if he were to hold out, considerable financial punishment for James Cook to hold out or sit in. This is why I keep saying there's really no leverage for him on his side, and there's no incentive for the Bills to get a deal done as it stands right now. But it's going to be an interesting situation to monitor. I, for one, whether he's worth it or not is one thing. I ask yourself this: would you be shocked if the Bills spent $15 million a year on James Cook, running back position in general. Would you be shocked by it? Not whether or not you want to do it or not. Would it shock you if it actually happened? Richie's saying, I don't think we need a disgruntled running back going into last year. Listen, I don't think he's disgruntled. I want to make that, at least from my perspective, I want to make that clear. The guy wants to get paid. I don't think he's disgruntled. These guys know there's a very short window of time to capitalize on your moment, to capitalize on your maximum value, especially at that position. I don't think he's disgruntled. I would have to imagine he's well aware of the idea that he does not have to be paid by the team this year in order to currently be under contract and have to play without accruing significant financial punishment if he did the opposite. He has to be aware of that. I wonder if it's more of an idea I wonder if he's more of the knowledge that he knows it might not happen this year, but he's putting the pressure on early. I mean, that could be another thing here too. He could be well aware that the idea of him getting that contract this offseason might not be awfully likely, but starting the talks now potentially makes it easier to get something done this time next year. Rico, what up, baby? We're talking James Cook. We're talking about the cryptic Instagram post. And it continues to be one of the more divisive discussions amongst the fan base. And I was talking about how Brandon Beane had said that just because we're not on the same page today doesn't mean we won't be tomorrow, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years from now. We'll see. And the idea I have behind it is it's not necessarily that I guess to me, the reason I'm not losing much sleep over it, the reason I don't think about it all that often, even though it's been put right in our face, really the last month, is because I just don't see on either side where a deal is going to have to be made prior to the start of this upcoming season. Also, not for nothing, knowing that the running back market is not going to be drastically changed this time next year, wouldn't you like to see another year, not from him specifically? We've gotten 2,000-yard year seasons. We know what he's capable of. It's only gotten better. Wouldn't you like to see another year, though, of where this Bills team is at? We are fresh off of a complete change offensively, essentially. We are fresh off of losing Diggs and Davis, fresh off of the first full year as Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator, fresh off the first year of Keon Coleman's rookie season, this offense being more predicated on time of possession, I would argue, than launching the ball down the field and putting up highlight reel plays on a weekly basis like it seemed to be a couple of years ago. We only have 1 year into this transitional phase of the Buffalo Bills offense compared to what it was the few seasons prior. James Cook also, like when we're looking at the stats, yes, we know what he can do on the ground yardage wise. It could not be more consistent the last 2 years. Really. Carbon copy years in terms of the production on the ground based on the yards per carry. Here's the biggest difference, though. 2023, James Cook had 237 attempts, just over 1,100 yards. And I think a lot of people are forgetting this. Here's the big kicker here. In 2023, yes, James Cook had 1,000-yard year on a similar amount of attempts, 237. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. 2 rushing touchdowns. He quite literally, what's the word for it? Not double, triple, quadrupled. What's the word for 8 times this touchdown number this past year? Yes, James Cook has had an awfully similar year on the ground based on the yards and the attempts. Drastically different this past season compared to the season prior when it comes to getting in the end zone. So even though it's felt like we've had 2 great years from James Cook, which we have, last year was an insane outlier based on the touchdown numbers. His rookie year, 2 touchdowns. Granted, considerable less amount of attempts on the ground, only 89. But 2 touchdowns nonetheless his rookie year. 2 touchdowns in 2023. 16 touchdowns this past year. So when you know that you don't have any incentive to pay him this year because you just don't have to, what's the harm in taking another look at that 4th year and seeing, hey, if we get another double-digit touchdown year and another 1,000-yard year, okay, feels great by me. I mean, I guess ask yourself this, because I'm seeing it in the chat. Obviously, those who, I think we can all agree here. Everybody wants to keep Cook. There's no reason not to want to keep him. Everybody wants to keep him. He's one of the best players on the Bills right now, undisputably. One of the best players on the team right now, no debate. Everybody wants to keep him. But ask yourself this. Let's keep that $15 million a year in mind. And say the Bills don't pay him this year. Goes into this upcoming season without that new contract. And it's another 1,000-yard year. But instead of 16 touchdowns, it's 7 or 8 touchdowns. To those who are adamant about paying James Cook any amount he wants, giving him that blank check, allowing him to write $15 million in on it and call it a day. 16 touchdowns a year. How sustainable is that? If it gets cut in half, that 6, 7, 8 mark, are you still all in on $15 million a year? I'm just curious. Because I wonder how much of the inflated touchdown number factors into let's pay him top of the market money right now. The benefit of having the 4th year here is to see, man, last year was insane. Can we find a way to get close to it? And I'm not saying in order for him to get he's got to go out there and lead the league in touchdowns again. I'm not saying that. Like I just said, it's not awfully sustainable. That number is crazy. Killer number. An 8 touchdown season for a running back is still solid. But I'm saying, I'm asking rather, if that's what we see next year, another 1,000-yard year, but now Al is asking an awfully interesting question. This is it's kind of related to what I'm asking here. He's saying, ask yourself this: how many of those touchdowns could any running back get? Look at Mostert from last year to this year, and it's a great example you're bringing up with Raheem Mostert. Because Raheem Mostert, it was just announced by Miami that they're going to be releasing him after 3 seasons. Raheem Mostert is being released by the Miami Dolphins. And nobody would have been saying that this time last year. Because Raheem Mostert last year had 18 touchdowns on the ground and 3 touchdowns through the air. In 2023, Raheem Mostert had 1,000 yards, his first and only 1,000-yard year of his career. In 15 games, mind you. He only played 15 games. He had 1,000 yards on the ground, 18 touchdowns on the ground, and he added an additional 3 touchdowns through the air. Now, I know this past year he was hurt. The numbers were considerably down. He only had 85 carries compared to 181 and 209 the couple of years prior. And I understand that he's also in his 10th year of his career. I get all that. I totally get all that. But if Raheem Mostert were to have gone out and had a similar 2023 or 2024 to his 2023 year, would the Dolphins be letting him walk? I doubt it. Now, the big difference here, of course, is the age. It's hard to compare these two running backs when, Raheem Mostert's been in the league since I was in high school and James Cook's going into his 4th year. But the point still remains. How much does the touchdown number this year impact the amount of money you want to pay right now? And then ask yourself this: if there's any impact on it at all, what's the harm in just taking another year to take a peek? Walt's asking, what does Mostert in Miami have to do with Cook? I know it's not the most balanced comparison. Like I just said, the age difference is massive. So you can't compare it strictly based on bringing a guy back or not on the numbers. But if we are just looking at the numbers, Raheem Mostert in 2023 had nearly an identical year to James Cook just did in 2024. Pretty much right down to the yards and the carries. And he had more touchdowns. And the point that's being made essentially is if the numbers go down for James Cook in 2024 or 2025, and I'm not saying that they go down marginally. I'm not saying that James Cook gets 915 yards and, I don't know, 13, 14 TDs. You're not going to be thinking a whole lot differently than a 1,000-yard year and 16 TDs. I'm just saying the 16 touchdown mark is an awfully high bar that's set. Awfully high bar. I mean, come on. Well, I'm explaining myself here. I just told you. You got a massive difference in age here. Massive difference. But the point is, if we're basing the contract currently on what just happened, my question to all of you is how much does your mindset change on the dollar amount if the upcoming year doesn't hit a massively high bar set this past year by James Cook? That's just essentially the question I'm wondering. Because we had 2 consecutive years of 2 touchdowns out of James Cook, obviously blasted into a different stratosphere this past year. But once again, the problem with such a great year is that the numbers are awfully hard to obtain on a consistent basis. It's a very interesting situation because nobody is denying the talent that James Cook has, how great that he currently is, or the fact that he's a top 7, 8 running back, depending on where you're ranking him and what your mindset is. Nobody's denying any of that. The only interesting thing here is that out of all of the top running backs that are considered to be in that pay grade, he's just utilized the least. That's what's so interesting about this debate. Because it feels weird even having the debate because it almost feels like it is questioning how good James Cook is, and that's not what's happening. That's what's so interesting about this conversation, is that it feels like just having the conversation puts into question how good James Cook is. But that's not the question. The question is, based on the amount of utilization, are you willing to pay the amount of money given to guys who are utilized considerably more for the amount of money they're being paid? I mean, just to give you an example, out of the top 16 rushing leaders last year, so the top 16 running backs in the league based on yards, total yards for the season, there were 16 total running backs in 2024 that had over 1,000 yards rushing. Out of those 16, James Cook had the least amount of rushing yards out of all of them. Consequently, he also had the least amount of attempts out of all of them. Out of the top 16 running backs in the league last year, based on total yards, James Cook had the least amount of attempts out of all 16. He was tied with Bucky Irving, a rookie running back, He was tied with rookie running back Bucky Irving for the least amount at 207. If you're looking for the next closest to 207, the next closest would be 235 from Rico Dowdle. So this is what's very interesting about this. Now, obviously, out of all of those running backs, was tied with Jahmyr Gibbs and Derrick Henry for league leading in touchdowns. But Josh Allen had 15 rushing touchdowns in 2023. He had 12 in 2024. So Josh Allen's putting up, his numbers went down a little bit in terms of rushing touchdowns, but we all know that he can get them. And you have to wonder, I mean, James Cook had a couple of insane, incredible rushing touchdowns last year, massive gashing runs that obviously you're not going to get from Allen, of course, or you're probably not going to get from a Ty Johnson. Maybe a Gabe or maybe a Ray Davis here and there, but it's not going to be the same. He was electric, no question about it. But I guess the overall point here is a lot of people I'm seeing in the comments, and this is a fair debate to have, of those touchdowns, how many could be replicated by other running backs in the league? It's a fair question to ask. And then when you're considering paying the top of the market money, the highest paid running back, essentially, you'd be the highest paid running back at $15 million outside of Christian McCaffrey. Of the top 16 running backs last year with 1,000+ yards, James Cook was 16th in total yards, and he was 16th in total carries. So I think the question moreover is it's not is he good enough? It's not that does he deserve it? Does it fit the bills? Does the finances fit the bills based on the way that they use them? That's the question. It's a good point you're bringing up, Wall, here, right? People are treating Cook like he's only been good for 1 year. Shakir has been here for 3 seasons. It's ass backwards. Cook was averaging 5.7 yards his rookie season. Shakir was bench riding. Shakir didn't get nearly as much burn his rookie season. But here's the other thing, too. Here's the other thing you got to consider. Khalil Shakir only had 10 catches his rookie year. Just something to put out there. He's nearly more than doubled his receptions each year he's been on the team. But here's one thing to consider to your point. I'm glad you're bringing this up. One thing to consider to your point, James Cook wants top of the market league leading money. The current average salary for the wide receiver position is let me just make sure I got my numbers right here. So there are currently 23 receivers in the NFL making 20 million plus or more at the wide receiver position. There is 1 running back in the entire league making $15 million or more. So to the Khalil Shakir point, he's not even making $20 million a year. He's making $5 million less than the highest paid 23 guys. For a wide receiver, too, he's making about the league average. For a guy of his caliber, he's making about the league average. So when you consider the production for Khalil Shakir based on the money, it all makes sense. But now ask yourself, if Khalil Shakir was asking for Jamar Chase money or Justin Jefferson money, would it make sense? And the answer is no. So if James Cook were asking for a league average salary at the running back position or less than the league average, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation. That's the difference here. So the comparison of Khalil Shakir to James Cook isn't necessarily a balanced one, because Khalil Shakir is making less than 23 other receivers in the league. Meanwhile, James Cook wants to make more than every other guy in the league. Mark's coming in. He's saying majority of the offense deserves a raise. Should be talking more about the lackluster defense. More money has been spent on that defense since he became the head coach. James Cook deserves every bit. And this is where I struggle. It's not that James Cook doesn't deserve the money. It's just that does the money make sense in Buffalo for how they use him? This is what's so fascinating about this conversation. Nobody's denying that James Cook's playing at a top level right now. Playing at the top of the league right now. But he's not that Hall of Fame tier that some of these guys are at that are making that money. He's not. And he's also not relied upon the way that those teams rely upon him. If we're talking about the highest paid running backs in the league, or the best running backs in the league that we view to be the best running backs in the league, they all had over 300 carries. Saquon Barkley had 345 carries. Derrick Henry had 325 carries. Jonathan Taylor had 303 carries. Jahmyr Gibbs only had 250 carries, but he's split in time with David Montgomery. So I know the counterpoint is, yeah, but he's getting in the end zone. I get it. But for the amount of money that he's asking for, it feels like your offense has to revolve around him enough to where it justifies the amount of money that the offense is predicated around the guys that are making that money. Now, that's another reason why you might want to go into year 4 and see what you got. Maybe you go into year 4 with the idea in mind of the amount of money he wants to make. And maybe you go into the year saying, let's see what happens if we do utilize James Cook more than we did this past season. Let's see what that looks like. Because there are times where it feels like maybe they don't utilize him enough. That does feel like it at times. Right? You look at the last 2 years, hovering around I think it averages out to about 215 yards per carry, or 215 carries per year. What is a 200 and I don't know. What does like a 260 yard carry season look like for James Cook? Al's coming in. He's saying, I agree. He deserves to be paid, but not that much and buff for how much we use him. And that's what it all comes down to me. If we were another organization, I know I used Indianapolis as my example. Like, I don't even know if we're debating it, because the team is just so reliant on the running back position, and a good one at that. It's the offense. Not that the Bills aren't reliant on what James Cook's bringing to the table. It's just that, are they top of the market money reliant on it? And by the time Josh Allen's contract kicks in, are you going to be paying top of the market one running back and top of the market quarterback money as well? Brock's coming in. He's saying, don't need any distractions in the locker room, period. Starting this BS talk before your rookie contract up is on social media. Unload his ass before. Bills ain't got time for that. Once again, this is why it feels even more odd. It doesn't feel like this is James Cook's. I mean, even the Brandon Beane and McDermott had alluded to it. Like, he's a quiet guy. We all know he's a quiet guy. This is why it kind of feels a little off. Once again, I'll reiterate, I don't think that this is a distraction. I don't think anybody looks at James Cook wanting to get paid as a distraction. Now, if he's sitting out, if he's holding out, right, or holding in at camp, then it becomes a distraction. But as I mentioned, it would be incredibly financially irresponsible to sit out this upcoming year. It would literally make no sense at all. And that's the only way to me that it starts to become a distraction. When you're in the locker room and not practicing, or you're not showing up to the facility at all in the offseason. That's when it starts to become a distraction. The idea of wanting to get paid, these guys all want to get paid. So I don't think it's a distraction by any means. I understand where he's coming from. Now, where I do agree with you is the idea of it being a year too early. I'm trying to find a way to wrap my head around why it's happening now as opposed to maybe this time next year. And the only thing I can come to is the idea of him wanting to plant the seed as early as possible, so that after another great year, this time next year, he's already put the pressure on for over a year now, and the Bills are forced to make a decision. They're not forced to make a decision right now. So the only conclusion I can come to is that James Cook just wants to get well ahead of the decision, I guess, essentially. Donut BOP. If he wants a ring, he needs to be team friendly. He's testing the waters for next year. If you tuned into Rico and I when we did our infamous mock GM, whatever you have, the GM simulator, this is one of the things I brought up as Brandon Beane, as I won the Academy Award for playing Brandon Beane in the situation. I had said, I agree with everything you're saying, Rico, right? I agree with everything. I agree that your client feels he's one of the best in the league. I agree that your client's play and his statistics up until this point have certainly proved that he's worthy of a contract extension and a considerable amount within that extension as well. But my counterpoint was, how much is a couple of $1 million a year worth to you? Because if you go to another team, you're not going to have this offensive line. You're not going to have this quarterback. And you're not going to have this great of an opportunity at a championship. If you walk out the door because you want $15 million, in all likelihood, the team willing to give you $15 million is not going to be in the current situation that Buffalo's in. They're not going to have as good of an offensive line. They're certainly not going to have as good of a quarterback, and they're likely not going to be they're more than likely not going to be in nearly as good a position for division titles, playoffs, championships, etc. How much is that couple of $1 million a year worth to you? The other key thing here too is, think about the benefit on the body of James Cook based on the amount they use him. He's still being awfully productive without having to be utilized the way other running backs are in the league. It's the counterpoint to getting paid the most, and how I've been saying it just feels tough to pay top of the market money for a guy that has over 100 less rushes a year than the guys making that money. The counterpoint to that is, you might be making a couple of $1 million less than those guys, but think about the benefit to your body on the position not having to be used as the battering ram that all of these other guys are being utilized as. You might not be making as much money, but you're still making damn good money, and you're also making it having to contribute nearly 110, 15 less snaps than the top guys. So to me, there's a situation here where it comes down to, what does James Cook value? Does he value the couple extra $1 million a year the most? Or does he value the offensive line that he gets to play behind, the quarterback that he gets to play next, that certainly opens up opportunities for him to be as good as he's been, the team that he's currently playing on and the success that they've not only had, but will continue to have, and the opportunities that come from that as well? Not to mention having that success without having to be utilized nearly as much as the guys making the top of the market money. So there's a lot to consider. I know for me, it would be something I would think about. You basically got two things on the table. You have the money, and then you have the ancillary benefits, so to speak. And the biggest difference would be, you're sitting at the table. It's kind of like, Neo in the Matrix. You got the two pills. And the one pill is $15 million. Somebody's going to pay me at $15 million no matter what. The other pill might be, I don't know, $11 million, but I get one of the league's best offensive lines. I get to play behind one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the league. I get to be on one of the best teams in the league. And I get to compete for a championship year in and year out. And I get to do all of that while still being a centerpiece of the team that does not need me to run the ball 300 plus times in order to be a centerpiece. It's something to consider. And at the end of the day, it's an awfully interesting situation that I don't think finds a resolution soon here, but will inevitably find a resolution at some point. And I'm awfully interested to see what that resolution ends up being. Scrolling through here. What's Jessica saying? Jessica's saying, Rico, is Z-Bot scared to talk about Sean McDermott's trash defense? Does he eat dinner with Bean and Sean? I wish. I'd go out for a bite with Bean and Sean. I'll go meet with them out in Indy. Get a bite, see what they have to say. We're going to talk about what others had to say about the organization in a little bit here, talking about the report cards that came home for the Buffalo Bills. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Take a peek at what the internal members of the organization had to say about those at the top and all of the other things surrounding the Buffalo Bills. Awfully interesting. I think that these report cards are interesting. One, I wonder how much thought is put into each response. And two, I wonder what the tipping point is. If there is thought being put into it, adequate thought being put into it, what is the tipping point to go from like one grade to the next? Sharon's coming in. Yo, bot. I wonder how Philly finds a way to pay for players, trade for studs, and draft dogs for the future. Well, we've talked about this before, but Philadelphia has several of their top players on restructured contracts. Tons of money down the line. They have also nailed the draft recently. Nailed. I mean, they took that secondary from being maybe the worst in the league a season ago to this defense being the best in the league last year. I don't want to say luck, but some of it has to be getting guys that just you could never have foreseen being as good as they possibly. You just could never have foreseen them being as good as they currently are. I look at a guy like Zach Bond, who had the interception in the Super Bowl. Zach Bond was one of, if not the best linebackers in the league. Just to give you an example of like a guy that the Eagles brought in, that Howie Roseman brought in, that you would never have guessed would have a year like he did, and he just did. So Zach Bond was drafted by the Saints in 2020, okay? Here's his numbers. Zach Bond, I think, led the league or was second in the league at the linebacker position in total tackles. With the New Orleans Saints since 2020, Zach Bond had 12 tackles in 2020, 30 tackles in 2021, 16 tackles in 2022, 30 tackles in 2023. Out of all 4 years with the Saints, he had 2 total sacks over 4 years. In 2024 with the Philadelphia Eagles, Zach Bond had 151 tackles and 3.5 sacks. He had a career high in tackles, a career high in assisted tackles, a career high in sacks, and tied his career high for interceptions. He had more total tackles in 2024 with the Eagles than he had combined his first 4 years with the Saints. He had more assisted tackles with the Eagles than his first 4 years combined with the New Orleans Saints. He had more sacks with the Philadelphia Eagles than he had combined in his 4 years with the New Orleans Saints, all in 1 year. So a lot of things got to go right, and a lot of things have gone right for Howie Roseman. Rico and I talked about this, though. First 8 years for Howie Roseman weren't all, glitz and glam. First eight years, Philadelphia wasn't nearly what they are now. And he certainly had his fair share of moves that weren't the moves we consider him to be making now that have been at the, world class. But that second half of his career here, they've been to 3 Super Bowls. They've won 2 of them, and it's been night and day. And Brandon Beane is now entering into that exact same transitional period where Howie Roseman went from being a pretty good GM, but nothing crazy, to being considered world class. Brandon Beane's now entering into that exact same phase that Howie Roseman entered into, where things started to really turn on for Philadelphia. But man, oh man, you got to have a lot go right, and they have. They have. They've gotten guys to take restructured contracts that has helped them free up money. They've drafted exceptionally well. The defense in particular the last couple of years, taking one of the league's worst to one of the league's best, seemingly overnight. Bringing in Saquon Barkley somehow from a division rival for money that feels like, it's, 12 and a half a year, but based on what you got out of it last year, one of the best running back years we've ever seen. Holy hell. Now, Howie Roseman, it's like I often say between McDermott and Andy Reid. McDermott's a great coach. Andy Reid's a legendary Hall of Fame coach. And the difference between those two it's not as big as you think in terms of their overall quality of coaching. But the outcome and the results and the success, that's what ultimately makes the biggest difference. And we know that Andy Reid's here, McDermott's here. But Andy Reid was in the same position McDermott was during his time in Philadelphia forever. That difference is oh so marginal, but man, is it all the difference. And it's kind of how it feels right now between Howie Roseman and really the rest of the league. I think you could throw Brett Veach up there with Kansas City, but they haven't acquired nearly the level of talent that Philadelphia has. But the thing you have to remind yourself, too, is nobody has. Philadelphia had the best team in the league going away last year. Best team in the league, not only performance-wise, but roster-wise. One of those rare teams where the team on paper that you'd sign up for in terms of I'm looking at the paper, that's the best team, I'm taking it. One of those rare teams where they were that good on paper, also that good on the field. So, you know how I often say that Kansas City isn't just a Bills problem, they're a league problem? Philadelphia is the same thing. You have 31 other fan bases essentially looking at the Eagles and Howie Roseman saying, how do we do that? Not just the Bills. So that's why you can't just shit on Brandon Beane for not being Howie Roseman, because nobody's Howie Roseman but Howie Roseman. That's why you can't shit on Sean McDermott for not being Andy Reid. Because it's not just Sean McDermott that's not Andy Reid. Nobody's Andy Reid. You got 31 teams looking at the Chiefs saying, how do we do that? You got 31 defensive coordinators around the league looking at Steve Spagnuolo saying, how do we do that? Except for Vic Fangio in Philadelphia. He knows how to do that. But you get the point. And that's what's so frustrating about it. So we have this conversation all the time about John Harbaugh and McDermott and Kyle Shanahan. Great coaches that just aren't that. And that difference is not that much, but it's all the difference. And that's why it's so frustrating. Channing coming in. Channing, appreciate you, brother. Channing's coming in saying James Cook is 5'11", 190 pounds, 260 carries will break his ass. Let's talk combine. Man, I guess that's a fair point you're making. You look at these guys at the top. I mean, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, but those are just freak. I mean, that's like the Josh Allen equivalent of the freak athlete at quarterback, but at running back. I mean, those two are not even human. Derrick Henry, I mean, that is literally a 85 Bears defender with the speed of a. I mean, I don't know. The guy is an anomaly. And then Saquon Barkley, he's just a specimen. Saquon Barkley's legs, I mean, I don't even know how do you even begin? Dude's legs are as wide as tree trunks. So I get all that. But I don't know. I mean, I tell you, this whole James Cook situation is awfully interesting to me. That's a good point you make because, James Cook, when it comes to the top running backs in the league, he is roughly 25 pounds lighter than the majority of them. I mean, it's a really good point you make. But once again, though, does that factor in to the decision to pay him $15 million a year? I don't know. By the way, Channing, appreciate you becoming a member, brother. Really appreciate it. Good to have you aboard. Really good point you made. Because I guess I haven't considered the discrepancy in size there. I mean, he does have about 25 to 30 less pounds than some of these top guys. The one counterpoint, I guess, would be Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams led the league, or was seventh in rushing yards this year, 316 attempts, which was third most in the league. And Kyren Williams only weighs 200 pounds flat. So there's guys doing it. But then again, however, Kyren Williams is a rookie. So, or excuse me, no, he's not a rookie. Why did I say he's a rookie? I don't even know why the hell I said that. Kyren Williams is actually the perfect comparison, believe it or not. Both of these guys are heading into their fourth year, Kyren Williams and James Cook. Both of them are coming off of 1,000+ yard seasons. But Kyren Williams in 2023 had 228 carries, and that notched up to 316 carries last year. With Matt Stafford at quarterback. 2 double-digit touchdown years as well. And believe it or not, Kyron Williams is 2 inches shorter than James Cook and only 10 pounds heavier. So he might be a fair comparison. But a lot of these other guys, you're right, they're in the the mid 220s. But it can be done. It absolutely can be done. Apparently, Jessica's on my ass tonight, says Rico. Z-Bot, we need 10 players on defense. We need 11 players on defense. Last I checked. Can we talk about that, please, sir? We can. We can talk about that. What do we want to talk about? I noticed that a lot of the questions being asked to McDermott, there's some similar questions that have been fired off to him in the presser and in his media availability this past week at the combine. The only offensive question outside of addressing the situation here with Cook, which was inevitable. Outside of that, the broad, what are we going to do about the offense question here? The only question that seemed to be consistent was the one that we all find to be the most obvious. And that is, are you going to be adding depth at wide receiver? And if so, is it going to be prioritized around speed and downfield ability? And obviously, you get the roundabout answer. Of course, you want to bring speed wherever you can. You want that downfield ability. Everybody knows, though, the Bills could add one thing right now. It is that wide receiver type of wide receiver presence, right? But the defensive questions are also the exact same too, and it's what everybody else knows as well. Are you going to be looking to add to the interior line or the edge, the D line in general? And are you going to be looking to add in the secondary? Those are the questions being posed. If I had a gun to my head and the Bills do not trade their first round pick, my all-in bet, my all-in guess would be that the Buffalo Bills utilize their first round pick on either a corner or a defensive lineman of some sort. And that to me is why that question's being asked so heavily. Now, in terms of that positional group, I guess we'll go with the defensive line, the edge. Something interesting to note, because Bean's also been asked, of course, about potential trade situations. Max Crosby, of course, has been essentially mentioned in the same breath as Myles Garrett ever since Myles Garrett announced that he wants out of Cleveland. And that's because it's been widely assumed that in order for maybe the Raiders to get to where they want to go, they might have to get rid of one of their best, if not their best pieces, in order to stack capital to rebuild here. And right now, I mean, Max Crosby's the face of the franchise. So when we talk about making a major blockbuster trade, that's why we often say Myles Garrett and Max Crosby. It's no longer just Myles Garrett. It's often been Myles Garrett and Max Crosby. Something to consider in terms of one of those guys being taken off the board and it having, the market come down to just one of those top guys being available. Rumors are flying like shooting stars in the night sky about Matt Stafford leaving the LA Rams and his new landing spot being in Las Vegas as a Raider. And the reason I bring that up is because if Matt Stafford goes to the Raiders, the idea of Max Crosby wanting to leverage his way out of Vegas, or the Raiders wanting to leverage him as a trade piece to revamp the team, goes away. The second you add a Hall of Fame quarterback to that team, who was a play away from potentially having this team in the Super Bowl last year, I mean, think about it. The Rams were the only team this past season, in the postseason, that gave the Eagles any sort of threat, any sort of competition. I know it felt like they were getting cooked for a while there, and they were. That felt like it was going to be a blowout until all of a sudden it wasn't. I think it's easily forgotten here. The Rams had that ball just on the outside of the red zone and could not connect to get a first down to move the sticks. They were on the doorstep of stealing that game from Philadelphia, and then there was no way that they were going to lose to a rookie quarterback in that NFC title game because nobody ever has before. Overall point here, though, is they were the only team that gave the Eagles any threat in the postseason, and they were visibly the second best team in the postseason in the NFC. Tom Brady has apparently been recruiting Matt Stafford hard. It's come out today that Tom Brady, who, if you don't know by now, is a minority owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, he was on a ski trip or whatever. He was skiing with Matt Stafford this past week, trying to recruit him in. And it's starting to seem like a likely scenario that could unfold in this offseason is that Matt Stafford leaves the Rams, goes to the Raiders, and then another Hall of Fame veteran fills the place of the former Hall of Fame veteran. Aaron Rodgers to the Rams. Charles is coming in saying, what are you talking about? Stafford just randomly bumped into Tom Brady at a ski resort. So I've been hearing two things, but here's what you got to ask yourself. Tom Brady, so Matt Stafford is being linked to the Raiders. Matt Stafford is being linked to the Raiders, and Tom Brady is a minority owner of the Raiders. I got to bring up the tweet that kind of summarizes what I'm getting at here. It was from Jordan Schultz. Jordan Schultz had reported today at around 2:30 that Raiders minority owner Tom Brady recently hosted Rams quarterback Matt Stafford at his home in Montana, where they spent time together and went skiing. Brady has been actively trying to convince Stafford to join the Raiders, and discussions are ongoing. And I think Jordan Schultz got a bunch of flack for kind of saying what you had just said, Charles, about these two kind of just bumping into one another. And Schultz replied to that idea by saying, if you really think Tom Brady and Matt Stafford just happened to run into each other at a ski resort in Montana, of all places, at the exact same time, I've got a bridge to sell you. They were together over the weekend. It happened. Multiple teams are interested in Stafford, and Brady has been leading the charge to get him to the Raiders if the Rams decide to trade him. So regardless of where you are in the belief scale in terms of whether or not it was orchestrated or not, there's no denying that but even prior to this, Stafford was linked to the Raiders. And the reason I bring that up is because it felt like Max Crosby, it was a snowball's chance in hell, but damn it, it was a chance nonetheless that the Bills could potentially make a play for him, kind of widening the opportunity to get one of those star-studded defense-changing defensive edge presences. If Matt Stafford joins the Raiders with Brock Bowers, who just put together one of the best rookie seasons we've seen at the tight end position, with a new head coach, national champion and Super Bowl winning head coach Pete Carroll, minority owner Tom Brady, Max Crosby's not leaving. If they bring in Matt Stafford, Max Crosby's not leaving. So that's why I bring that up, because it would then come down to Myles Garrett. And I feel like if the Bills are in a bidding war with the rest of the league, not that they wouldn't be already, I just kind of found comfort in the idea that there'd potentially be two players to kind of split that bidding war up a bit. Now I believe it's only going to be one. And man, oh man, even if it is just one, I hope the Bills find a way to put all their chips in the table. But I am firmly, I mean, my opinion could change over the next 2 months, but I'm of the firm belief that, you know, if the draft were tomorrow, the Bills are going defense in round one. And it'll be D-line or the secondary. That's how I see it. But even though it was a pipe dream, it was a dream nonetheless. I just think if Matt Stafford goes to the Raiders, that dream is dead. And you know we love our dreams. We love our synthetic scenarios where we hypothesize the idea of Max Crosby being spotted at Duff's, or we hypothesize the idea of Myles Garrett being spotted at Barbell, right? Matt Stafford becomes a Raider. No one's going to be seeing Max Crosby eating wings in Buffalo anytime soon. I know you guys want. You were pressing me on defense. One more note I wanted to make on the offensive side of things. Back to the wide receiver position. If you guys watched the presser for McDermott and Bean, McDermott was asked about Keon Coleman, and McDermott was blunt. McDermott was blunt about his assessment of Keon Coleman in year one. McDermott flat out came out and said, I believe it was yesterday, that Keon had an up and down first season, and he felt that it was rocky after the injury. Brandon Bean was asked about this, and Bean kind of did, I don't want to say damage control, but he kind of added context to what McDermott had said. And he had said that he thought he was trending up and wasn't able to hit his peak because of his injury. But he made a good point. You know, some of these rookies that are drafted are already 23 years old, 22, 23, 24. Keon Coleman is 21 years old. The Bills were able to do what they did offensively last year, and Keon Coleman was not a primary focal point. And even though that's not satisfactory for us, we were hoping that Keon Coleman would come in and immediately be a difference maker. The silver lining in that is that the Bills' offense still had the production that they did in 2024, and it did not include a massive rookie season for Keon Coleman. So if you go and look at the numbers, it wasn't overly impressive. But when you compare Keon Coleman to the 2024 rookie wide receiver class, he only played in 13 games. All top 8 rookie wide receivers last year played in at least 15 games. Malik Neighbors played in only 15. That's what made his numbers even that more impressive. He was only 70-some yards shy of being the rookie leader in reception yards, and that was with 2 less games than Brian Thomas Jr. But Keon Coleman only played in 13 games, and he only had 57 targets. Of the top 8 receivers in the rookie draft class, his target share is infinitely less than those top 8. Brian Thomas Jr. had 133, Neighbors had 170, Brock Bowers had 153, Ladd McConkey 112, Marvin Harrison Jr. 116, Rome Odunze 101, Xavier Worthy 98. Keon Coleman had 57 targets, and he was averaging 43 yards per game. So if we were to just take his average and add it to the 4 games that he was missing, you'd get about 170 yards. And if you add the 170 yards to his 556 on the year, then you'd have him right in the realm that Xavier Worthy was at with 98 targets. The point I'm making here is I think we got to be a little bit patient on Keon Coleman. The expectations for Coleman last year were sky high because of the lack of wide receiver talent and overall depth the Bills had going into the year. When Diggs and Davis departed and Coleman was drafted, the narrative immediately shifted to this passing offense having to be predicated around a rookie wide receiver that was considered to be somewhat of a project, that was considered to be a receiver that was going to take time to hit his maximum potential. That's not including the injury as well. Only 57 targets, only 13 games played. McDermott was right in saying that it was an up and down year. It was. There were certainly moments where he flashed, and then there were certainly moments where it felt like he wasn't even on the field. And Brandon Bean essentially said the same thing. Brandon Bean pretty much said he was trending up, but the injury threw a fork into that. But the point he made is the one I took away. 21 years old. 21 years old. Had an injury last year, only 57 targets this year. Only 57 targets this previous year. There's a lot of people that are already wanting to call Keon Coleman a bust. And as we're seeing right here, where did I see it? Al was coming and saying, need to be patient on any rookie. You can only hope they come out a banger. Exactly. You need to be patient on any rookie. I think you need to be even more patient on a rookie that, one, it was known going into it that it was supposed to take more time than maybe other guys would take to reach the top potential. And two, I think the patience should be broadened for a guy that was expected to be the leader in the wide receiver room. Khalil Shakir was, of course, going to be the focal point, but in terms of wide receiver one type talent, wide receiver one type game style, that's what Keon Coleman was drafted to be. And the idea that he was going to immediately be that, yeah, it was high hopes for us Bills fans, but the reason they were high hopes is because we had no other hopes to have. We had no other hope to be hopeful about. He was the solution to the departures. There needs to be more patience exhibited towards Keon Coleman and what he could potentially be for this offense. Like I had mentioned earlier about Khalil Shakir is wide receiver 2 on most teams. He was wide receiver 1 for the Bills last year, and they averaged 30 points a game. Imagine how good he could be at wide receiver 2. Imagine how good this offense, or the point was, imagine how good this offense could be if he was wide receiver 2. Imagine how good this offense could be if Keon Coleman takes that next step. They were already doing what they did last year, and he was pretty much a non-factor. Imagine how good they could be if and when he takes that next step. He had the injury. He was already considered to be a guy that was going to take time to develop. Only played 13 games, only had 57 targets. We need to be more patient on Keon Coleman. We have yet to see what he's fully capable of, and I think this year is going to be a big year for him. And I'm glad that McDermott and Bean touched on that because they stated the obvious. It was not a particularly great season, and it was certainly up and down. But Bean hammered home the one thing that I think sticks out the most. 21 years old. Plenty of time to see what we got with Keon Coleman. Plenty of time. And I'm very excited to see what that might be, especially if the Bills are able to add even more talent around him, which I anticipate that they will. Before we head into hour 2, another quick reminder that we're powered by BetUS. Promo code is YouTube150. That'll get you a 150% sign-up bonus up to $2,000 on your first deposit and 125% bonus on your next 2 after that. As we move on in to hour 2 of the program. Super chat coming in from Divine Demigod. This just in, the league to use electric markers to mark first downs according to ESPN. You're kidding me. Also, love you guys, and I listen to every episode at work. Divine, the love is mutual. Appreciate it very much. Love to hear that work includes a little smoke break because every shift should have a smoke break. Appreciate you, Divine. Much love. Got to get to James earlier. I don't think I saw James's super chat earlier, seeing it now. And James is saying, how many of these high-paid wide receivers are playing in January? You don't always get what you pay for. A.J. Brown is the only top 10 wide receiver to play post-divisional championship this year. Now, it's an interesting point you bring up. I have a hard time dogging on the Bengals because of how great that offense was. I mean, the Bengals, by most statistical measures, were one of the best offenses in the league last year. The defense was so bad that the team they were on the outside looking in. The defense, being as poor as it was, outweighed as great as the offense was. But the A.J. Brown point is interesting, too, because I think the Eagles still win the Super Bowl without A.J. Brown. That's how much of a focal point Saquon Barkley was to that team. Plus, they also have Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith. They're not lacking talent. A.J. Brown is just a massive cherry on top of an insane Sunday in Philadelphia. And A.J. Brown as a talent is no joke. Top 5 talent, no question. but they barely even need him. That's how great Philadelphia is. They could have won that. They could have won that championship without him. Could have gotten to it and won it without him. But I do see what you're saying. The Chiefs won more Super Bowls and appeared in more Super Bowls than they did with Tyreek Hill on the team. Tyreek Hill leaves the team. The Chiefs go to 3 consecutive Super Bowls and win 2. The Bills lose Stephon Diggs, have an historic year offensively, average 30 points per game. The idea, though, has never been that the Bills have to add another Stephon Diggs. That's not where I've been. This, like I've said in the past, this past season has sort of mind-effed me in terms of how I view the value of a true $35, $40 million a year stud wide receiver. Would you love to have it? Yes. Do you need it? No. What I want the Bills to do is add more guys of the that are in the realm of the Amari Cooper type basket of the league. That mid-tier level financially that also has high upside on the playing field. And I think that's what we're going to see them do. Who that is, it'll be interesting to find out. Whether that is Amari Cooper again, maybe take a stab at Chris Godwin, somebody like that. The Bills just need to add more depth, more heads, more guys. Even last year, Curtis Samuel, who was pretty much non-existent throughout the regular season, look who came on throughout the postseason. Curtis Samuel did. He became a reliable target in the postseason. Mac Hollins, of course, is the number one example, a guy who led the team in touchdowns at the wide receiver position, one of the surefire leaders of the entire offense. Now, obviously, you'd like to have a bit more than Mac Hollins. You don't want to have that. You don't want to have the boom or bust special teams guy littered all over the field being relied upon offensively. You want 1 to 2 Mac Hollins, no doubt. But the Amari Cooper realm of wide receivers is where I see the Bills kind of hovering over for a while here until they're able to either develop Keon Coleman into hopefully that top tier wide receiver that we're hoping he transitions into, or another guy that they draft, perhaps. This idea, though, that the Bills are going to be able to go out and get, even if T. Higgins were to hit free agency, are they going to be able to pay T. Higgins $30 million a year? Highly unlikely. But the Bills have proven what they're capable of doing with Josh Allen with guys that aren't of that caliber, as you're mentioning, Mountain James. The success of a lot of these teams have not been revolved around the highest paid, best wide receiver talent in the league. But it's not that the Bills don't have to add. They certainly do. Adding in a financially responsible way. And that's why I love the Amari Cooper signing so much last year. What they got out of him, the numbers won't tell you it was successful. The impact I think he had on the team certainly was. That's why I'm, a bit iffy on bringing him back for whatever his market value is right now, $14 million a year. The value that they got out of him last year for next to nothing from Cleveland was what you would have hoped for. Obviously, numbers-wise, people were expecting or hoping for a lot more. But the impact he had on the team, I thought, was visible for the value that they invested in him. They lost 1 regular season game after adding him. 1. But can they continue to find guys like that hopefully have more upside in the stat sheet? And maybe Amari Cooper is that. Maybe another year comes back, and that's exactly what he is. We'll see. All right. In the 2-hour mark, and the one last thing I wanted to get on before I have to go pick Caroline up at JFK. I got to drive to JFK, and it's like, is there anything worse? Is there anything worse than having to go and pick someone up from the airport? The answer is no. But is there anything worse than having to go pick someone up from the airport in New York City? Driving around JFK, I don't know if you've ever done it, if you've ever had the distinct pleasure of having to drive through JFK. JFK is like its own mini city where the traffic laws no longer exist. You make one wrong turn at JFK and you got to go all the way around the facility again. So say you go to the wrong pickup area Only way to get back to where you want to go is to go all the way out, all the way back in. The airport is literally a city in itself. It's massive. And there's always a million people there. Bartek knows what I'm talking about. Growing up in Brooklyn, you know it. Yeah. There's nothing quite like it. That's why I love the Buffalo and Rochester airport really make you appreciate smaller airports. When you go to like JFK or you go to O'Hare, LaGuardia, and then you go and fly out of Rochester, you fly out of Buffalo, you truly appreciate flying in and out of a small airport. And when you're picking somebody up, that's when you really appreciate it. So that's what I got to go do. But before I get after that, the report cards have come out for all 32 teams in the NFL. They do this every year. The NFLPA anonymously surveys each team based on a variety of categories and then takes the average of those scores to give the final score based on those categories. Do this every year. I love it. Gives you insight on what the teams have going on in a variety of categories, things that you wouldn't even think about, like the food being served at the facilities or the nutritionist and the dietitian in the facilities. Those are all put on a F- through A+ grade scale. And those just came out. And the numbers or the grade letter or the letter grade rather from 2024 to 2025 for the Bills has diminished quite considerably, which is shocking to me at least. Because for as great as things are in Buffalo and seem to be in Buffalo, there are certain things on these sheets that don't necessarily hit home with the players. So if we go and take a look here, here are the letter grades for the 2024 Bills report card. The culmination of all the grades resulted in the Bills being ranked 11th out of all 32 teams based on each individual category. They were the 11th overall team based on the teams, the team themselves, the players, satisfaction of the team. And these are the categories, same as this year as well. Treatment of facilities, the Bills scored a B in 2024, sixth best in the NFL. The food in cafeteria, they got a C in 2024, 23rd best. Nutritionist and dietitian, D+, 29th. Locker room, B+, 8th overall. Training room, B+, 8th overall. Training staff, B at 19th. Weight room, A+, second best in the league. Strength coaches, an A, third best in the league. Team travel, their second worst category 2024 was a D. Head coach, A. Ownership, A-. This was 2024. 11th overall with all of those all those categories, rather. Categories. Jeez. Summed up. This year, not so great. The Bills nosedived on their cumulative grade score from 2024 to this year. And I just wonder, once again, I said this at the top of the show, I wonder how much thought did the players actually put into this? Are they just kind of writing down the hell out of the building, or are they really thinking about it? And what really factors in to their scoring? How much thought do they really put into it? And what really factors in to a player grading between an F and an A? So here's the scoring for 2025. The Bills were 11th in 2024, 23rd in 2025. Nearly over 100% decrease. go from 11th to 23rd. What could have changed so drastically between 2024 and 2025? Because this is a considerable drop-off. Now, this particular version gives a breakdown of what each category is defined as. So this year, treatment of facilities, B+. Last year, it was a B. So that increased. The definition of treatment of facilities, and I kind of like how they define what each category is. So the players rate post-game family area, and they also rate how the team overall feels about the organized family events, stuff of that nature. B+ for the Bills. That was an increase from a B in 2024. The food, looks like the Bills got it right compared to 2024 in the cafeteria. They're chefing up some better chow in the mess hall over at One Bills Drive. They went from a C to a B-. So the food is on the up and up in Orchard Park. The nutritionist and dietitian, B- for the Bills in 2025. Another uptick from a D+. Considerable uptick, actually. So things have gotten better in the nutritional realm of things for Buffalo. The locker room ranks in at a B. That was a B+ in 2024. And now you might wonder like what the locker room means. What does that mean in terms of a grade scale? The locker room is based on players feeling they have enough space in their individual lockers, which 79% of the players felt that they do. And then it's also based on players believing the locker room size is adequate, and nearly the entire team thought it was. Now, I don't know how nearly 100% satisfactory rate on locker room size and a near 80% satisfactory rate on space of the locker results in only a B. But I guess it does. B- for training room. 2024, that was a B+, so a slight decrease there. Training staff. Now, this is notable because the training staff was a B in 2024, went down to a C in 2025, and what do you know? That was one of the major moves the Bills made right after the season ended. The Bills started off the offseason by firing strength and conditioning coach Eric Ciano. So it seems like that was for good reason. And a lot of people had felt that maybe the injuries that the Bills were suffering might be due to perhaps an inadequate training staff. Those theories were out there. The proof seems to be in the pudding here, not necessarily saying that the injuries are pinned on anybody not suffering the injury, but based on what's at your disposal after suffering an injury or just needing training staff in general. The Bills ranked nearly dead last, 27th out of 32 teams, with 75% of the Bills players reporting that they receive enough one-on-one training. So found that one particularly interesting because the Bills ranked near the bottom of the league in training staff, and the Bills just got rid of their lead strength and conditioning coach, Eric Ciano. So that'll be one to keep an eye on for next year, because with Ciano out, and they're currently looking for a replacement right now, will that increase next year with the change? That'll be interesting. Now, this is what confuses me, though. The strength coaches was given a B+. I don't know how that differs all that much from the training staff. Unless it's a completely different. I mean, I don't know how these are all that. I don't know how that's all that different. The strength coaching ranking is based on individualized training and the strength coaches contributing to their overall success. The training staff is receiving enough one-on-one treatment and the overall training staff contributing to the overall success. I would feel like that goes under the same umbrella, the training and the strength. I don't know. I guess maybe it doesn't. But the strength coaches was considerably better than the training staff. Weight room, however, A. Players are loving the weight room. Now, this one I thought was real interesting. The Bills ranked dead last, bottom barrel in team travel, F-. I didn't even know that was possible. I didn't even know it was possible to get an F-, a letter grade worse than an F. 35% of the Bills players feel they have a comfortable amount of personal space on team flights, ranking dead last, 32 out of 32. So comfortability, main issue. One of the main issues in the building for the Buffalo Bills on the planes, comfortability. And I'll tell you what, you got a pretty damn good organization when the worst thing about it is the comfortability on the plane. Perhaps Terry Pagula might need to splurge on one of those upgraded jets to get a little bit more comfortability for the big fellas traveling to and from. The players also found that their team schedule is very inefficient. Dead last as well. So the Bills ranked dead last in comfortability of travel and in schedule efficiency. And the synopsis is here that players feel that travel continues to be the worst part of their experience. Players do not have a comfortable amount of space when traveling, and the travel schedule itself is a source of significant dissatisfaction. I don't know how you improve that, though. Unless you just upgrade the jet. How do you improve the team travel? They're going to have to splurge and get one of those high-end PJs for the boys. Now, head coach comes in. Now, here's how head coach is graded. It's based on players' belief in the head coach being efficient with their time. Bills ranked 24 out of 32 there. Now, this is where this gets a little bit skewed, right? It's also based on players feeling that the coach is receptive to the locker room feedback. So they get a B here. And last year, McDermott came in with a A. I don't know what changed between one year over the other, but it's still a B. And for some reason, a B results in 27 out of 32. So you might see that number and be like, oh, I've already seen this being thrown around on Twitter. Oh, there it is. There it is. Classic McDermott ranking towards the bottom of the league. How is a B 27th out of 32 teams? And if we go and look here to all those people who are like, oh my God, there it is. Classic example of McDermott, being graded where he's at. If you go down and look, Harbaugh, B, right? Sean Payton, B. And then there's some teams with an A that I just don't quite get. Dallas Cowboys, A? They just fired Mike McCarthy. Raiders, A-. They just fired their head coach. A+ for Miami? How? And this is where you have to wonder, what is this based on? Is it based on being your friend? Because if it's based on being your buddy, then I understand why Mike McDaniel is ranked A+. But there's a reason why I believe Mike McDaniel enters into this upcoming season on the hot seat. Because his approach to the team and their overall philosophy and the culture that's been built in Miami is one that has resulted in them being marched on by the top talent in this league. So I wonder what this grading scale is based on. Obviously some of these make sense. Like Kansas City being an A+, that makes sense. Dan Campbell being an A+, that makes sense. Mike Tomlin, A+, that makes sense. But the idea that McDermott is on the same ground level as Robert Saleh, I don't see it. A half letter grade below Gerard Mayo, who gets fired after 1 year. So I just wonder, these are awfully interesting to me because I don't know what goes into the mindset behind it, behind the grade, and what does that necessarily mean? What is the player thinking of when they're voting on this? Because the grade would not reflect the overall outcome. Not only towards the bottom here, well, some of them do. Like Jacksonville and Chicago make sense. Jacksonville and Chicago being at the lowest tier of head coaching grade makes sense. Cleveland, these all make sense. These are three of the worst teams in the league, right? But you have Baltimore, Buffalo, and Denver, all three AFC playoff teams being in the same realm as the Jets and the Patriots. Meanwhile, you have Miami at an A+, Arizona at an A, Indy at an A, Dallas A, Raiders A-, Carolina A-. So these grades are interesting to look at, but the idea behind it, I'd love to know like what goes into the psychology behind making your grade, because some of these things just don't add up to me overall. And then finally here was ownership. Pegula was given a B. Owner Terry Pegula's average rating for perceived willingness to invest in the facilities is 8.44 out of 10. And that's the other thing that's kind of skewed on these grades as well, is like you would think 8.4 out of 10, that's a pretty dang good mark, but it ultimately results in less than on the lower half of the 32 teams in the league. The players feel that ownership moderately contributes to a positive team culture, and maybe that's because Terry Pegula isn't nearly as hands-on as other owners in the league, but I think that's a plus. I think that's a benefit. And I don't know what negative criticism could be garnered on Terry Pegula for his time owning the Bills. And that's what sticks out to me the most on these overall grades. Like, to me, team travel, that's an easy one. Either you love it or you don't. Like, if traveling is awful, that seems to be easily subjective to me. Either we have a really good traveling experience, we're comfortable when we're traveling, things are smooth, we go from A to B with no problem. That's an easy one to grade on, in my opinion. But like the head coach and the ownership one, what's the nuances that go in behind the grade? Especially when you look at where some of these guys are and where you would perceive them to be. Like if we go back here, like if you were surveying the fan base, that's the interesting thing here. You were surveying the fan base's perception of the coaching based on the overall perception of the players in the coaching, it would be drastically different. And if you were to look at the success of teams based on the coaching and then based on the grading and kind of correlate the two, like no way Atlanta would be all the way up there. No way Miami would be up there. Arizona, Indy, Dallas, Las Vegas. And you got multiple teams in here. You got multiple teams in here that graded higher than the Bills, with coaches being fired. So the question is the grading based on the belief in the coach's ability to win? Is it based on the overall leadership, or is it based on like, oh, he gets on my ass if I'm late to a meeting? Or, oh, hey, he's really cool about us cutting out of practice early. Like, is that what it's based on? Go back to school. Right? Go back to your time in school. How would you grade a teacher? You'd be more likely to give a teacher that gave you more recess time an A+ compared to the teacher that really got on your ass, but really made you work hard and get ready for college. The teacher that's giving you the extra recess time, the teacher that's letting you screw off in class, you're probably more likely to give him an A+. The teacher that's in on you, making sure you're doing the right thing, making sure that you're studying, making sure that you're doing well, that unfortunately is probably the teacher that's less likely to get a high grade. So I'm wondering how much that contributes into it. The one that sticks out to me the most when it comes to that is Mike McDaniel. Because after watching Hard Knocks and just the overall aura that Mike McDaniel kind of exudes, he seems like your best buddy. He seems like he's a guy that the players would want to hang out with. And I don't necessarily think that that's what I want as my head coach. It might be great as a coordinator, but the guy calling the shots, I don't want him to come across as buddy-buddy. I want him to come across as the teacher that's making sure that your ass has your head in the books and acing the tests. Even though we might like the teacher that lets us throw paper airplanes around the class more than we like the teacher that makes us study each week, the teacher that makes you study each week is doing their job the right way. They're doing what they're asked to do. They're doing it by the letter of the law because that's how it's supposed to be in order to result in the best outcome. So I find that to be awfully interesting. But what I find to be the most interesting is the mindset behind the grades. Like I mentioned, like for cafeteria, either the food's good or it isn't. Pretty self-explanatory. You go to the cafeteria, the food's good or it's not. Simple. You get on the plane, you either have a nice travel experience or it totally blows. Coaching, ownership, what goes into that? And I immediately thought to that school analogy. Because if I'm thinking of some of my favorite teachers, they were the teachers that I would hang out with, passing through the hall, having a free period, and I look in the room and they're, hanging solo, grading papers, go in and hang out with them. And I'm not saying you can't do that with McDermott. I'm sure you probably could. But those teachers were also the same teachers that during class, they were not nearly as stringent on, keeping your mouth shut and locking into the paper. And at the NFL, I want the guy telling you to keep your mouth shut and dial in. Walt saying he missed the owner grade. The owner grade for the Bills was B-, I believe. No, B. Flat out B. And then the other thing that's kind of, once again, so just to give you pre-warning, when you go on Twitter and seeing McDermott getting ripped on, because I've already seen this, the letter grade is not very telling to me of the overall spot you rank among the 32 teams. Just to give you an example, the Bills' ownership received a B, and that was good for 17th out of 32 teams. Sean McDermott received a B, and that was good for 27th out of 32 teams. So optically, you're going to look and see, oh, wow, just saw McDermott ranked 27th out of 32 head coaches. I told you. I knew that guy was the problem. Meanwhile, if you scored a B on your test, I don't think you're crying yourself to sleep at night. Right? Meanwhile, Mike McDaniel's getting an A+, and, they can't beat a team over 500. So what goes into the mindset behind it? I don't know. I just found that to be interesting. You can go take a look at that if you want to, by the way. It's over on the NFLPA's website. I think it's good that they do that, though. And I bet you the teams take that pretty seriously, I would imagine. If you're an owner or an executive for the team, like, for instance, the Bengals, the Bengals food and dining area received an F-. F-. How bad? I think I saw Warren Sharp tweet out that the Bengals food was considered to be lower quality than that of your local prison. The Bengals received an F in food and dining area. How bad does the food have to be for the cumulative score of the cafeteria and food offerings to result in an F? I mean, when's the last time you went out to eat and you were like, that was so bad that I wouldn't eat this for free. I wouldn't accept $1,000 gift card to this joint. When's the last time that happened to you? Obviously, I'm sure you've been out recently and it wasn't great. You might not go back, but you're not going to give it an F. Like if you were to leave the place and they send you an email, grade us between A to F. It might not have been the greatest in the world, but are you going to give it an F? Think about that. How often have you been out to a restaurant, had a meal, and you leave there and you look at your husband or wife or your kids or whoever, your buddy, and you say, F? I honestly can't think of the last time I've even been in that scenario. That's how bad. The one that always stands out to me the most on this, though, is the treatment of the families. That one always seems to stand out to me the most. Because if I'm an owner or I'm a high up in the organization and that is at the bottom tier, that to me, out of all of these categories, would be the biggest kick to the gut. Because what could be worse than being categorized as the organization that doesn't treat the families of the players well. It's one thing to have just absolute crap food. It's one thing to not have enough leg space on the flight. But to be the team that's bottom barrel in treatment of the players' families, what could be worse than that? So not only does Cincinnati have the worst food in the NFL, they were the only, I believe, the only team. Let me check. Yeah, Cincinnati was the only team in the league to receive an F in treatment, or excuse me, in food. They also scored the lowest possible score imaginable on treatment of the families. F minus. There were only 2 Fs given out to treatment of families: Jacksonville and Cincinnati. So Cincinnati, they got to get a new chef in there, and they got to get a new PR guy in there, a new PR staff member in there, getting the culture right with the fam. Because by the grading system here, you can't have a good meal in Cincinnati, and the family is not in a good spot in Cincinnati. That, to me, though, if I'm running an organization, out of all of these individual categories, by far, the one that would stick out to me the most would be treatment of the families. Like, how could you feel worse about yourself than ranking F minus? How does that even happen? I mean, is Cincinnati are they cussing out family members when they walk into the facility? How the hell do you get an F minus in this? What is Cincinnati doing to the family members to result in an F minus letter grade? I don't know. That's crazy to me. Those are B plus in that, by the way. So there's the report card. Not necessarily one I want to put on the fridge, but you got to take it all with a grain of salt. Because in reality, the only thing that the Bills really ranked poorly in was travel. And I'm interested to see how that changes next year. Like, what do the Bills got to do to get that on the up and up? But like I said, if the worst thing I can say about my team is that we don't have enough leg room on the flight, I think we're in pretty good shape. And that's what the Bills' current situation is. So there it is, the report card. Whether or not you want to show it to mom and dad, that's up to you. I know it says 23 out of 32 teams, but nothing overly glaring here to me, other than the training staff, which we'll see some changes made there, and then the travel. Terry Pagula, balls in your court. Got to get the Gulfstream, the 2025 Gulfstream with all the bells and whistles for the boys. Let's make it happen. Come on. All right. That is going to do it. 2.5 hours in the books on a Wednesday evening. Touched on a variety of topics, including, of course, these player grade report cards put out by the NFLPA. Touched on the pressers from the combine from Brandon Beane and McDermott and what they had to say. Touched on James Cook's contract situation. Touched on Khalil Shakir and his extension, and a little bit of other sprinkles in between. And I appreciate all 1,000 plus of you that hung out with me throughout the duration of it. Also, reminder as always, powered by BetUS. YouTube 150 is the promo code on BetUS. Use YouTube 150 to get a 150% sign-up bonus up to $2,000 on your first deposit and 125% bonus on your next 2 after that. Combine kicks off tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of more news and storylines coming out from that and beyond. And I'll join you again later in the week to touch on that. Rico's out of town this week, but I'll hop on with you again at some point, whether or not it's Friday, Saturday. At some point, we will be back together. We'll touch on what we haven't heard out of Indianapolis thus far this week. We'll get in on what comes out from the combine, which kicks off tomorrow afternoon. I'm sure there'll be plenty of stuff coming out to talk about, and we'll dive into that later in the week. But in the meantime, on your way out the door, like button if you could, subscribe button if you could, and head on over to BetUS and take advantage of that promo code YouTube 150. Once again, can't thank you enough, as always, for tuning in, spending some time with me on a Wednesday evening, and I look forward to getting on here with you again later in the week. So, with that said, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night, folks. We'll talk soon. Much love, as always, and go back.